Around with me, I thought I'd bring the lip back. I haven't done lips in such a long time. And y'all know I love a good lip. Hey y'all, welcome back. Happy New Year. This is the first video of mine that's going up in 2024. I was just about to say 2023. It's a new year and I'm hoping that it is a good year for all of us. It's just been, 2023 was a doozy, but we made it through another year, thank goodness, and here we are. So y'all know I typically do all of my end of the year content at the beginning of the preceding year. So you're going to be seeing a couple of videos from me that are going to be talking a little bit about things from 2023, and then I'm going to shift over into just doing back regular content. I've already planned out my content for the month of January. I'm going to be doing some bulk filming. One of the things that I did say in 2023 was that I wanted to choose one particular filming day, and unless it was a vlog, if it was a sit down video, I wanted to get all of that filming knocked out for the week, because it just will work better with my schedule. I'm extremely busy and I know that this year is probably going to be even more intense and even more busy, and so I need to make sure that I am a little bit more scheduled out than I have been in the past. But today, as you can see from the title of this video, which, you know, this everybody's favorite videos, best worst of, and I always like to end on a positive note, so we're going to start with my worst and most disappointing books of 2023. Now, I had a very, very good reading year last year. I know last year was not everybody's, you know, year of reading. A lot of people were like it was a mid-reading year, but I think because I stuck to what I love, and I read a lot of comics and graphic novels and manga and children's stuff. I had a lot of fun with my reading last year. Last year was the highest average rated reading year that I've ever had since I've been tracking on Goodreads, starting in 2014. It was a 4.0. It is never that high, but my average rating for last year was a 4.0. So this was an interesting list to make up. Like I read over 500 books last year, which I'm going to be having a discussion video coming out a little bit about how I managed to do that. But I read over 500 books last year, and I went through all 500 of those books, and those are 500 books that I documented. There were books that I didn't even document from last year. It just didn't happen. So that number is actually wrong. I know for a fact that number is actually wrong, but at that point I was just like, I don't care. It's not that serious. So it was actually hard for me to do my top 10 worst books of 2023 because of the fact that I had such a good reading year. Now, what's interesting is this is the reason why I literally hold off on doing this video until the beginning of the following year. I literally finished a book probably a day and a half before the year ended, and it was horrible. So that's why I kind of hold off on making these videos, because I tend to find favorites and I also tend to find disappointments within those last few days of the year. But we're gonna go ahead and jump in. They're just 10 books. I decided just to keep it to 10 because it was even a stretch for me to find 10, which is amazing. I'm happy about that. But we're gonna do the top 10. Some of these you've already heard me talk about because you have. Some of these you haven't heard me talk about because it came closer to the end of the year, but we're gonna go ahead and dive. Okay, so the first one that we have on this list is Spare by Prince Harry. We all knew that this book was going to be on this list for me. I did not enjoy this at all. I did a very long review during one of my weekly roundups for this specific book, and I think I talked about this book for about 20-25 minutes. I didn't do a standalone review. I had opted not to do a standalone review, but I ended up reading it and was not impressed at all. One of my biggest issues with it is that it was very long. I think by the time we got to the second part of the book, because it's divided into 3 parts, the second part of the book focuses on his military experience, and there were some questionable things that he wrote in detailing his military experience. Even though I knew that he was extremely passionate about it, it just was not my thing. It was not my cup of tea. I did not like it. I did not enjoy it. And then there was some kind of like deconstructing that I think that Prince Harry didn't engage in. He does not want to hold his family accountable for the impact impact that they've had on the global community in terms of like colonization, and really laying the groundwork for a lot of the issues that we see on a global scale right now. And so it just, the naivety behind it, I think, is what kind of threw me off, because it was just like, oh, I didn't expect my family to be racist towards Meghan. We all know, like, come on now, like, it just, I don't know. I feel like if he would have taken a little bit more time to really think about what he wanted to put pen to paper, even though I know he had a ghostwriter, and I understand that he was trying to take the narrative into his own hands, but there was just so many aspects of this book that I did not enjoy, that I was not looking forward to. And I don't even think I rated it on Goodreads. I typically do not rate memoirs, but I have another memoir that showed up on this list that I did not like at all either. But yeah, this was not it. It was extremely long, boring. The conversations that him and William have had about like who gets to have Africa, like it was just, there were some very, very cringe moments that I didn't enjoy about this one. I know it was a 4-book deal that they signed with Penguin. I think this was the deal with Penguin. If I'm wrong about the publisher, let me know. But I know it was a 4-book deal. I don't know when the other books are coming out. I don't know the context of the other books. And quite frankly, I don't care, because I will not be picking them up. The next one that I have is another one that I spent an extensive part of a weekly reading log talking about, and that is The Black Queen. This is supposed to be a young adult thriller that focuses on the death of the first Black homecoming queen in this small town. I forget what state it takes place in. It's told in a dual narrative, and one of the characters is white and one of the characters is Black, is Tinsley and Duchess. And I thought the premise of it was going to be interesting. Don't get me wrong. I knew based on the description going into it that we were going to get a look at the racial tensions that exist in this community. I knew that it was going to be a deep dive into race. That's not a problem for me. I don't take issue with that. What I took issue with in this book is that it's told in dual POV. Duchess is the best friend of the young girl that ends up murdered. One. You knew who the killer was very, very early on. It was very, very obvious who did the deed. It was not surprising. It was not shocking. You could figure this out in between 25 to 50% of the book. You'll know exactly who the killer is. So there, it wasn't well written in that sense. If we're writing a thriller, it was too easy to engage in that reveal. 2, you often forget that Duchess is a vital character to all of this, because she seemingly fades into the background. There were some interesting things that I think could have been done with her character, especially because her father's a police officer, and there's a conversation to be had about Black people who serve in an organization that does not have the best relationship with the Black community as a whole. I thought that could have been an engaging and very interesting like storyline to consider. We get none of that. Duchess is just kind of there as, I don't know, to let us know that we have Black characters, because the dialogue felt really, really forced. It did not feel like, you know, the AAV that was incorporated into this book like happened naturally. Didn't really like that. And there was too much on her end, I think, explanation of Black culture. Once again, I always say, like, if you're gonna write a book and it is stemmed or steeped in a specific culture, let your readers do the work. Don't hold their hands. It's time to hold readers accountable for being able to do the work. If it is not a culture that they are familiar with, then encourage them to do the research to acquire the knowledge themselves. You're holding their hand, you're explaining everything, and then it ends up feeling like this book is not written for the Black community. This book is written for the white gaze, which is what this book felt like. Because in the third point, Tinsley is the center of all of this. Tinsley gets a redemption story in all of this. We get to watch Tinsley become anti-racist and really understand the error of her family's way, and to start reading the right books. I didn't pick up a book to learn about a Black girl getting killed for it to be the catalyst for a white girl to realize her white privilege, to understand systemic racism. It wasn't it. Like, that wasn't it. I didn't like it. I didn't care for it. I know that this author has another book that's coming out this year. I will not be reading it, because if this is any preview of what we're going to be working with, I would rather just kind of stay away from it. The next one that we have is Fat Angie. I'm not going to talk about this one too much because I did do a standalone vlog for this. I read this as part of my banned book diaries, and I always tell everybody when I do my banned book diaries, which you'll be seeing more of those this year, it is not my intention to necessarily go in thinking I'm going to like every single book, because that's unrealistic. The purpose of the banned book diary is to get a better understanding of why the book is being challenged or banned, and really I'm not really understanding it, but to get a better grasp on what content people are talking about, what elements are included that have made people feel like it's warranted to be banned or challenged. And so this was one that was, this actually was the first one I did, if I'm not mistaken. I did not like this book at all. It follows a main character who is dealing with severe suicidal ideation after they have a sibling that serves in the military and unfortunately passes away. And so they struggle greatly with their mental health, and it's kind of dark and gruesome in some ways, but they are deemed Fat Angie by so many people at their school, and a lot of that is internalized. It was very, very difficult to be in Angie's head. It was super, super difficult to be in Angie's head, and I didn't like it. Angie referred to herself as Fat Angie, and I was just like, this is not the fat rep that I am looking for. This is not the fat rep that I would pick up and want to engage with. And I just didn't like it at all. But if you want to know more of my specific thoughts about that one, then I definitely will make sure that I include that video in the description box below or up above, wherever it is. I don't know what side it's on. Next one that we have is Patience and Sarah. We read this as part of the classic lesbian romance book club, which has been a time and a half. I really couldn't decide whether I wanted to go, and honestly, I could tag team both, to be honest with you, and I may just do that. So two of the worst books this year, and I'm gonna include this one, and I'm doing some readjustments here in real time. But two of the worst books that I read this year were part of the classic lesbian romance book club. Not good, y'all. So the first one was Patience and Sarah, and this is supposed to be like the first lesbian historical romance, right? Oh my gosh, y'all, it was horrible. There was like some incestuous things going on with this. There was a very much so like shaming, like sex shaming of a main character. It's these two main characters who live in the same community. They have this attraction. One of the main characters is definitely presents more as a young boy and a man, and they're very comfortable with that, and their father is comfortable with that. But when they link up, it's like she can't do that anymore. Like, you know, you have to put on dresses, you need to be more feminine, and it just was really, really icky, because that character definitely felt like very much so coded like as an enemy character, but I don't know if that was necessarily the intention of the author. And so it felt weird when our other character was telling her like, oh, you have to put on more girly clothes, or like, I don't want to have sex with you because you're too loud. It was just poorly written, and their relationship was not romantic. It was just not, it wasn't good at all. I did not care for that one. And then the other one that we did that I did not care for was Loving Her, which was showcased on my channel. So for both of these, I'll make sure I share the live shows where we discuss them. But Loving Her is the first lesbian, well, it's not the first lesbian, let's put it this way. The author is credited as being the first author to include a out lesbian character, because prior to this author there had been a lot of Black authors that had written coded lesbian characters who didn't outwardly say that they were lesbian, but you could tell just from context clues that they were. And so this is the first where we get a Black character that is out, and then we also see our first interracial relationship between two lesbian characters. Now this deals with the main character who ends up leaving her abusive husband and takes their daughter, and ends up connecting with an old friend in which they have this, you know, extravagant lesbian relationship, which is it's a bit, it's some weird things. I don't even have the words. I'm stuttering because I literally don't understand their relationship dynamics either. She has this little girl, and as someone who is a parent, and I understand that being a single parent and then trying to like date, it's very, very hard. It's very, very complicated. You always want to make sure like you're weary of like who you're bringing around your kid. It's going to be a good fit for your family. And so there's an extra layer of things that are included when you have children and you're trying to get back into the world of dating. But this just felt like the daughter was just kind of like off and pushed to the side. And it was weird because like she would send her daughter away so they could just have these like extravagant just moments together. It just didn't feel like the daughter was really relevant to their relationship dynamic, which I thought was very, very strange. And then the author does some horrible, horrible things to the child at the end of this book. And I was very, very pissed off about it because it was a catalyst for them to break up and then find their way back together. It was disgusting. I was very shocked, and I don't know if that was for like shock factor or what. But I think that the messaging that the author sent in this book, I was just not a fan of. I know that there was supposed to be some commentary on like the plight of like Black liberation and how it's very much so centered on the patriarchy still, and how that impacts Black women. But there were just some comments that she made that were just too extreme for me. I don't like to work in absolutes, and she definitely worked in absolutes, especially in regard to Black men and Black women, and I didn't like that. I just thought it was just some poor decisions to make, and not saying that the conversations that she was bringing up weren't worth having, because they definitely are. And I definitely read a young adult book today that looks at this, the movement of Black liberation and how it still was seeped in some ways in patriarchy, and as a result you see a lot of misogynoir that ends up happening through the lens of Black liberation. And that's not to say that that's not a conversation worth having, but to say that all Black men or all Black women is, you know, you can't apply all, because everybody is not the same. The Black community is not a monolith. And so I felt like she was working in that type of situation, and I wasn't a fan of that. So yeah, so we covered two with just that one section. After that, I know everybody's expecting this one. You should not be surprised. Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. This is one of the most popular books that I think came out in the book community last year. I know, I mean, not even just like in the book community as in our online spaces. I definitely think it was a huge thing for those of us that are just involved in the reading community at large. At the library, it was a huge thing. Even amongst people that I work with, everybody was reading Fourth Wing. I did not like this book. I refused to read Iron Flame. I'm done. I gave the first one a try. I was like, you know, I'm newer to romantasy. I want to try it. But I think that for me, I've read books with dragons. Okay, so the dragon appeal was very much so lost on me. I think that a lot of people were fascinated by it. I understand that, especially if it's your first time like dealing with dragons. And while the dragon element for me was cool, I was just simply like, at the end of the day, you know, they didn't get enough airtime for me. They didn't get enough screen time. Like, they really didn't. And so I've read better dragon books, but that's not just the only thing. This just feels like a you know, adult version of Divergent in a lot of ways. And I don't know if that's what she was going for, but the world itself makes absolutely no sense. And I'm not the first person to say this. I won't be the last person to say this, but Fourth Wing, the world itself makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. I mean, why, if we need more soldiers, would we actively attempt to put them through a training that kills them? I mean, if you understand that, explain it. That makes absolutely no sense to me. The core premise of this book makes absolutely no sense. Our main character, Violet, her, oh gosh, The romance did not feel romantic. Getting to the spicy scenes, it felt like two rocks going at it. It was not a turn on. I felt nothing. It was just, I was like, oh, it was so cringy. All of it was cringy. It was, I tried very, very hard, but this felt very juvenile in plot and characterization. None of it felt like it is up to the standards at which people hold it as this amazing piece of literature. I do know that people are able to get in there and really just kind of going for the vibes. But if anything I have learned from last year, I am not a vibes reader. I cannot go into a book and be like, the vibe is just great and screw everything else. Because inevitably, my brain doesn't work that way. I'm going to go in and I'm going to notice things even if I try hard not to. When I first started Fourth Wing, I was like, you know what? It did. It gave off like, okay, I like the vibes. I like the kind of like divergent feel to it. Like we're going through like dauntless like training. I was feeling it. I was vibing with it. And then we started getting more explanation of the world and the characters. And I was like, yo, this makes no sense. It was too long. It dragged in certain areas. The ending was kind of epic, but it wasn't enough for me to be like, oh, when Iron Flame comes out, I'm definitely gonna read it. I don't care enough. I could, that's a part of a hype situation that I'm like, you know what? I'll be outside the party looking in because sis don't want to be a part of it, and that's all right. The next one that I read was, I read this one on a whim because I'd received this book I think I received like a finished copy for review, and I ended up listening to it on audio, and it is a Jane Eyre retelling. It's Reader, I Murdered Him, and everything was good. It's a very gothic kind of vigilante, queer vigilante retelling of Jane Eyre, but we're getting it from a character, and I haven't read the original text, but we're getting it from a character that is not Jane Eyre or Rochester. This is another character that is kind of sent to live with Rochester, gets to know Jane and Rochester's previous wife, whatever, and she's noticing some things that are going on in terms of the dynamics between men and women of the time. So we're looking a lot at like gender roles, femininity, the power that men hold in the society, the expectations of women in the society. And so the commentary was very interesting. This would have been a 3-star book for me, right? It wasn't the best written book. And at that point when I was in the book, it wasn't the worst thing that I had ever read. But honey, when we got to that ending, and I don't even want to tell y'all because this is a spoiler, and I couldn't figure out why for the life of me, because I do tend to like look at a handful of reviews from people I trust prior to going into a book. And, you know, I try not to read too deeply into it because I don't want to be spoiled. But for the life of me, I was like, why is this book rated so low? Like, what is going on that this book is just not doing well? And then I got to the end and I said, oh, I see the FY. I see why. I see why this book is rated so low. The book is rated so low, y'all, because the ending makes absolutely no sense. And you don't even have to have read Jane Eyre. Apparently, if you've read Jane Eyre, the ending is even more offensive. But if you haven't, it's still offensive. Like, what in the world? It's disgusting. It was a twist for shock value, and it completely turned me off. I was like, yeah, absolutely not. Like, that's sick. That's sick and that's twisted. It's disgusting. And I don't know at what point did we get here, because there was nothing when I went back and I thought about the flow of the book, which, like I said, is focusing on a main character who becomes a vigilante of sorts to avenge women in society that have been harmed by men. And you know, I was vibing with that. And I don't understand to this day how we got from that type of environment to the conclusion where I was like, it's sick, it's twisted, it's disgusting. I was like, whoa, left field. No content warning. Like, it was not for me. I don't recommend. I highly don't recommend. Like, the The premise of it is interesting. The structure of it and the commentary is not done at its best, but it's done well enough. But that ending ruined the entire book. All right, the next one that I have is, ironically, is a reread. Now, I was debating on including 2 books by this author on this list, but I left the other one alone because I still gave it in between a 3.5, even though it was a disappointing book. But this was just not a good book, and that is A Great and Terrible Beauty by Libba Bray. Now, I read this one in the second book in the series about, oh gosh, has to be like 5-6 years ago, maybe even more than that. I read these books around like a couple of years after they were releasing, or around the time that the final ones were releasing, because this first book released in 2003. So maybe no, I think I read them a little after that. Yeah, not a little after that, a lot after that. I read these a lot after that. So this book, as of last year, is 20 years old, and it does not hold This book does not hold up, y'all. This book is, no, it's not. It does not hold up. So we're focusing on a main character by the name of Gemma Doyle, who's living in India with her mother, and something goes wrong, and she wants to go to London. First of all, her mom's like, no, you're not going out to London. Like, I'm not sending you out there. And she's like, well, I want to have like an official and a proper coming out. And her mom's like, no, you don't understand. Like, you really don't need to go to London. And so something happens to her mother, and so she ends up having to go to this boarding school. She gets into this boarding school, and she ends up befriending a couple of girls that are there. I say befriending, take that very, very lightly. And Gemma is trying to explore these abilities that she has. Now, what's interesting about this book is that if you've read the Diviner series, there is some indication that Gemma Doyle could actually be a diviner. And at this point, it's not a spoiler, man. This book is like 20 years old. The Diviner's books are extremely old at this point. The final book in the Diviner series is 4 years old at this point. The first one came out over 10 years ago, but there is some indication that Gemma is possibly a diviner, and 2 characters in the Diviner series are known to be able to dream walk, and in this I got the vibes that Gemma also is able to dream walk. And so she is trying to better understand this great ominous person by the name of Circe. She's kind of like a villain, and she's pairing up with these young girls, and they're able to dream walk together, which of course creates some very dangerous situations. My issue with this book is that we constantly have to deal with, and granted, I know that this book is 20 years old, and at the time of this book, it would have not been seen as inappropriate to use this word, but now, 20 years later, it was such a grating thing on my ears to hear the slur that people have so commonly used for Romani people. And it just was like, oh my gosh. And then on top of that, there was just this characterization of Romani men as being aggressive and hypersexual that I did not like. It was very, very obvious. There was a characterization of Indian characters that I did not like. They were either caricatures or they were always like servants or villains in this book. I did not like that. There was a lot of fat shaming in this book with one of the main characters. Fat shaming and constantly calling a character ugly, and like, oh, I don't want to lie to her and tell her that she's attractive when really she's ugly. There's so many things I think that were normalized in this book for the time in which it was written that are not accepted now, and so it made it a very, very difficult read. I'm struggling with wanting to go back and reread the second book and continue with the third book, because I feel like there is this definite connection between this and the Diviner series, and Libba Bray is releasing a book in October of this year, which I think could also potentially be connected to this whole concept of diviners. But now, in the heart of my heart, I'm wondering if it's even worth it, because this was such a cringe reading experience for me that I don't know if I can do it. I'm not getting rid of this copy, because people are like, why do you have this copy of this book if it was the worst book that you read? I'm not getting rid of it because it is signed and personalized to me. So with that being said, I probably will hold on to this, but boy, oh boy, this was just not a good book, y'all. This was not a good book at all. All right, and the last 2 that I have on my list are ones that I both read in December. And these 2 books just, we're gonna go with the nonfiction first, and that is Counting the Costs. This is by Jill Duggar, and I didn't even rate this book, y'all. I didn't rate it, but I gave it a scathing review on Goodreads because, you know, I just had felt some type of way. Now, I grew up watching like 19 and Counting, 16, whatever, how many different versions of the TV show they had. I was very familiar with the Duggar family. I was just interested because I was like, I never want to have that many kids. I was young saying like, if I was to ever have kids, I'm not having that many. You could not pay me enough money to have that many kids. And there's a lot of things structurally that are wrong. I mean, we all know that there's so many things going on with the Duggar family. Their eldest son was convicted of having CPs, been accused of sexual abuse in the past. And so there's a lot with that. And, you know, just a lot of different things with the family pieces, dynamics. And so they are part of a very far-right conservative Christian group. They believed in certain things in terms of like, you know, wearing dresses, not wearing, you know, a lot of makeup, not making yourself or designing yourself in a way that makes you temptation for a man, which I knew what I was getting into when I got into this book. I think that, you know, I kind of knew that there were going to be some things I rolled my eyes because it's just not my thing. It's not what I believe. I don't knock anybody's beliefs, but sometimes it's kind of hard for me to reckon with some of the things I hear. This was not a tell-all book, okay? I don't know if I was going in expecting it to be a tell-all book, but it didn't shock me that it wasn't a tell-all book. This was mainly about her experience being a part of the Duggar family and how her father did her wrong and didn't pay her money the way that he should have paid her money and had kind of exploited her, including the birth of her children and her wedding and her marriage and not seeing a dime from any of that. What you will not find in this book is any criticism of their mother, who I feel like enabled Jim Bob. Michelle gets no criticism in this whatsoever, and I'm not sure if that's due to, you know, religious beliefs or what have you, but there's no accountability. There's no accountability for Michelle. She doesn't hold her mother responsible for everything or anything. Jim Bob is the primary one, and even then, they still maintain a relationship with the family. So I don't know how much of this to even buy into, because a part of me also feels like this is a way for them to make some money, okay? She talks about her experience, her and her husband doing missionary work. I grew up in a fundamentalist church when I lived with my great-grandmother. And it's just some of the things that are taught in regard to other religions and things that are taught in regard to other races. Things that are taught in terms of how women are to be perceived and received by men. It ain't it, y'all. It ain't it. I just didn't like it put a bad taste in my mouth when I got to that section of the book. I also felt some type of way about the fact that they had the audacity, Jill and her husband had the audacity to write this book, right? And meanwhile, you're looking for sympathy, or you're asking for empathy about your situation, for people to understand how much your father has put you through and how difficult it is for you because you love your family, but family did you wrong and yada, 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 yada. But your husband is out there making homophobic and transphobic comments, and you want us to give you some type of sympathy. Now, I did not realize the amount of comments that he had made and the nature of his comments that he had made until I was halfway through this book. Because I started looking at reviews and I was like, I'm not vibing. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's a me thing. And then I realized, like, other people were like, oh no, this is interesting considering that, you know, your husband has made some very disgusting comments about people, and yet you want people to give you empathy and sympathy because you feel like your way of life is right, and so you're worthy of people showing you respect, empathy, and sympathy. But because your husband feels like someone who is gay or someone who is trans, that's not the correct way of life according to his religious beliefs, that gives him just cause to go and make those nasty behind comments on social media. Girl, you could save that. Ain't nobody finna give you no sympathy, no empathy with your wild behind mother, your wild behind daddy, and your husband out here. You exchange one controlling man for another. And I usually don't get this grimy and dirty when it comes to memoirs, because I always feel like people should have the space to tell their story. But I just found it so ironic that you can go and ask people to understand your experience and to see where you're coming from and to be empathetic and to show you grace and mercy. but your husband is out here being disgusting on the internet. Like, make it make sense. Make it make sense. Now, I do feel like what Jill experienced at the hands of her father and her brother are absolutely terrible. It's disgusting. And I know it took a lot for her to be able to put that stuff to paper, okay? That takes a lot to relive that trauma and to put your trauma on display for the rest of the world. I know that that's difficult. Why are we not telling your daddy to like, hold this man? That man is disgusting. Your brother's disgusting. He's disgusting. He's disgusting. There's something wrong with him. And hold your parents accountable. Everybody wants to stand beside him. No, drop him. Disgusting. It's awful. It was so many like, oh, well, we can excuse this or we could do this because these people share the same faith as us. But for those who don't share the same faith as you, you can't give them that same grace. You can't give them that same empathy because you don't agree with who they are. Like, dumb. I just can't. Never again. Part of me is like, why did you do this? I was curious because I had like grown up watching a lot of their show. Not every single episode, but here and there. But child never. And the next one that I have, which was the book that I finished like a day and some change before the year ended, is Hunt on Dark Waters by Katie Robert. Oh, Katie. I say this time and time again. Katie struggles to write plots. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to explain it. But Katie struggles greatly to write a cohesive and engaging and fun plot. Okay? I wish I had the words to really, I don't know. This is so I don't even have the words because this book has so much potential, y'all. It's a romantasy that focuses on a main character by the name of Evelyn, who is a part of this world that is not that much different from ours. And they have paranormal creatures is a normal. Demons, witches, warlocks, vampires. It's very much so a part of their everyday world, right? And her and this vampire are engaging in it's not even a romantic relationship. It's more of like a physical relationship. Things go left and then she ends up trying to leave and she jumps through this portal, which puts her in the ocean. She gets picked up by the ship, and it's this concept of you serve the ship or you die. It reminded me a lot of like Davy Jones. Like you give your life to serve the ship, or you end up getting killed, and you only have one of those two options, which I feel like that's where Katie may have gotten this inspiration from, is Davy Jones. But I was like, okay, this is cool. I like this idea that we have these groups of people who are supposed to be protecting the realms, like, you know, preventing people from being able to jump into realms and enter realms that they're not supposed to be in to cause chaos and havoc, because you have a lot of like mythical creatures who are involved in this entire universe, and unfortunately they can't just go into a realm because they feel like it. I do like that. I like that Katie kind of pushed Evelyn to be this catalyst for questioning Bowen. Like, okay, you're a part of this group, right, that's known for protecting the people, but are you really protecting, or is this a power play? And so that part of it was interesting. I thought that the idea of the world was really, really interesting. The execution was not there, y'all. Oh my gosh, the execution was not there. The romance between Evelyn and Bowen was just kind of like sudden. They went from like not standing each other. There was this hesitancy, like there was an initial attraction, I think, on Bowen's end, but Evelyn was very much so like, I'm just trying to freaking go home. Like, I need to go home. And that's the simplest 1, 2, 3. And I'm finna figure out how to go home, because one of the caveats also is that if she attempts to leave, like, they will hunt her down until they kill her. And so, you know, she gets them involved in some really weird situations, but it's like they went from point A to point B. And as a reader, I felt like, well, where and when did they fall in love? Because I was like, did I miss something? Did I skip some chapters? Did I skip some pages? Where did I miss this? I must have missed something, because where did they fall in love? It just felt too instantaneous for my liking, and I'm good with instant romance, but this felt like we were developing one idea of a romance and then just completely shifted over into another idea of a romance with like no explanation or development in between. I think that Katie felt she leaned so hard into their romance that the world was kind of left to the wayside. We have no explanation of how this world exists, this universe, actually. Like, it was kind of briefly explained in the beginning. We kind of get some idea, but I wish that, you know, I think one of my things with romantasy, which I'm gonna see because I feel like I'm gonna try a little bit more romantasy this year, is gonna be finding that balance of romance in fantasy. I already see that, and this did not do a good job of that. I think the fantastical elements were kind of wasted on the relationship dynamics between Evelyn and Bowen, and then Evelyn and I can't remember the vampire's name that we meet in the beginning. I feel like we're so caught up in that the idea of the world building kind of just falls. There's some interesting things about Bowen and how he ended up being the captain of the ship, because they're part of this group called the Sinwin Onwin. I don't know how to say that. I couldn't even tell you how to pronounce that. But there's some interesting dynamics of like how he ended up being a part of that group and getting picked up on the ship, but Katie just never explains it. It's clear that he has a gap in memory, like something about his memory is lost, and that he recognizes things that he feels like he shouldn't recognize, almost as if he was taken away from the realm that he was a part of. But it's kind of like we throw that out there and then we just forget about it. And I don't know if that's going to be included in book 2, but book 2 is from the perspective of a completely different character. And I feel like if you were going to delve into that and you were going to change perspectives in the next book, you should have wrapped that up in this book. We should have got a better understanding of where he came from. We got some understanding of Evelyn's background, like being raised by her grandmother and being a witch and, you know, learning how to develop these powers. But we kind of left Bowen's, his whole thing just kind of like in the dark. And now, as someone who did not like this first book, I don't know whether I'm going to dive into the second book or not. And so I may never understand what this man's background is. The steamy scenes are always hot. I don't feel like that's Katie's weakness. It never has been. And I've read a lot of Katie Robert books at this point, which is ironic. I don't ever feel like the steam is where she falters. I feel like her actual plot development and character development is where she fails. And there was a review that pointed this out well. This one struggled even more because it is a universe that she had to develop herself. All of her other stuff is based off of worlds that already exist. They're Greek mythology retellings, Roman or Greek and Roman mythology tellings. You know, you have the Disney retellings. Like, this is a world that she had to create on her own with no kind of like assistance from a prior story. And so it makes the story even weaker. But it's not to say that the concept is not there. The concept is there. The concept, the idea of this book is very, very fascinating. It's one that I think I would have enjoyed, but it just kind of like, you forgot about the world, and we were so hyper fixated on Evelyn and Bowen's relationship. Not to say that we shouldn't have gotten that, but it's almost like you dropped the ball on one end to fixate on this other thing, and it just didn't work for me as a book, y'all. Unfortunately it didn't. I'm still on the fence about whether I'm going to read the second one. It is from the perspective of the vampire that I do enjoy. I did enjoy the character in this one, and it's going to be a sapphic romance. But at this point, if we're not going to improve on the character on the world building, I don't think that this is going to be a series for me, unfortunately. So I don't know. I know a lot of people have been like, okay, well, I'm kind of done with Katie Robert, and I don't want to give up on her just yet, but I just may have to. So we'll see. All right, y'all, those are the worst books that I read in 2023. Let me know in the comments down below what were the worst books that you read in 2023, and I will be back this week with the best books that I read in 2023, which is going to be a little different. I'm actually going to have to do that very, very differently, where I'm going to have to separate it by age category because I read so many good books in 2023. But yeah, as always, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content from me, click the subscribe button and hit the bell for notifications. If you're looking for ways to support the channel or follow me on social media, all of those links will be down in the description box below. And I'll be back with another video soon. Bye!
I'm on my own, broken and alone. I feel the rain crashing down all around.